Hi, I'm Jacqueline Sanders Blackman, and this is
Dawn Major. How are
Hi,
you
welcome
today?
back. Welcome back to our channel. We are today going to talk about disagreeing nicely. Don't you agree, Dawn?
I do agree.
So we've got a lot of tips, a lot of things to help you become self-aware. And we're going to break this up into a couple of different areas and give you an opportunity to listen and absorb and then take it back to your teammates and your colleagues, work on some things, and then invite them to listen to some of the other parts of the series, and you can even listen to it together. And definitely remember to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. So we're just about ready to launch. And whenever I say launch, that reminds us of what, Dawn?
To listen, learn, and launch. Listen, learn, leverage, and launch so that you can continue to grow in your career.
Absolutely. Listen, learn, leverage, and launch. So come along with us. Okay, here we go. Disagree nicely. This is part of what we are focusing on to help teams align. And we even have a word for team alignment. I call it teaming. Teaming with the ing, because teaming is an action, it's a verb. You continuously have to work on it, not just when all is going well or in the beginnings where everyone's being nice, but there's a lot of things that it's so important on the front end when you're building the team to talk about. And one of the biggest things, let's talk about how are we going to disagree? Because when you bring a lot of different personalities, as well as just people with different experiences, you want everybody to have an opinion and a point of view and to put input, but not all of them are going to align right from the start. So let's jump right in and let's talk about, Dawn, you and you've spent team just recently as we speak, working and in environments, and who you work with can change with every project, with every assignment. And it's the people that you immediately work with, but it's also the team of teams. You have to collaborate with other teams. Just tell us from your perspective before we jump into this. Have you seen where teams, how do they, on the front end, do they talk about disagreement, or do most of them kind of, once they hit that wall, then have to deal with it? What's been your experience?
I can give two different experiences that I had. So we, as you know, went through one of your training sessions, my whole team. So prior to us going to that training, I think we had a tendency to sometimes shut down individually when we disagreed. So you would either have it to where someone as myself, who's kind of like an extrovert and quick to voice my opinion, may say, oh, I don't like this, where other team members who may be somewhat introverts may just not speak on it at all. But you can tell by their actions of lack of a participation that they probably did not agree with what, maybe was being suggested. So we were just kind of all across the board, but not coming together as one to say whether we agree or disagree so that we could move forward. After the training, we found ways to communicate, whether it was using fist of five or things like that, to where it allowed us to be able to find a way to communicate our disagreement.
No, absolutely. And you've already touched upon a couple of key points, just from being a real live witness, is it's just as hard on the people that are extroverts who are speaking up, as well as the people that are introverts. For the introverts, it's festering. And it's sometimes when it does come out, or sometimes it comes out too late because they're leaving the team. And they never
Mhm.
actually put it out on the table for the team to reconcile it. And there might have been an opportunity for reconciliation. On the other hand, the extroverts, because sometimes I tend to be in that same group as well, speaks up, but you feel like you're carrying the burden for everyone else. And
Mm.
then sometimes when you speak up and you know you're speaking the truth because you've heard it offline or you've heard it in sidebars, but no one else in the room, you get crickets. You're like, you felt like you've really put yourself out there. And then even the extrovert can feel beat up as well, or even isolated, and eventually may find that they withdraw, because that's something that I know that happens with me after I get to a certain point of frustration, and then I shut down. And I often tell people, when I stop talking, then that means that I've hit that wall of frustration. So you see all those signs, and I put that out there, especially for people who coach or scrum masters or the leadership team. Um, when your extroverts start getting quiet, get concerned. And then also, and that's what we'll talk about here, making sure you're creating, we talk about creating safe space. And your space is safe when even your introverts have a way of weighing in. It doesn't always have to be, just jumping into the middle of the conversation, but they have some form to bring it to the team, not the sidebars or the after the meeting kind of expressing, but right then and there, putting it out there so that the team has an opportunity to recognize and acknowledge how they feel on the topic. And that could be in the form of, that's why, I'm often doing, thumbs up, thumbs sideways, thumbs down. That's a way to get people to, are we on the same page? Is this worth, talking about? Or
Mhm.
are we, or even, are we okay? Are we not okay?
Mhm.
Um, and so, I had to bring it back to coffee and espresso in some form or fashion. And when I found this picture, kudos to this artist that actually takes and does their artwork with coffee. So I will forever be a fan. But sometimes I look at this picture. This is my artistic impression of this, our interpretation. But it's like sometimes you got to spill it. You got to get it out there, and it can be messy at first, but I like the way how it shows the little person kind of being that bridge, and everyone else, but everyone looking forward and looking to finding a bridge. And that's the thing about teaming. Teaming is, sometimes it's messy, sometimes, and awkward and uncomfortable. And I know people sometimes want to avoid that. And I, as a coach, one of the most important things that I have to do is to get us through and embrace the discomfort, because I often say on the other side of the discomfort is breakthrough.
Mhm.
And this is how you really grow as a team. It's coming through the awkward moments. And Dawn, you probably know about a few awkward
Oh, yes.
moments.
Very, very much so. And I mean, like you stated, just you can't see the breakthroughs coming. All you see is the hard pain and the fact that we are not in agreement. And with any relationship, when you're not in agreement, it's difficult. And so, but yes, definitely had to get across some hard moments. And it was, I think, mainly to the point of what you had stated at first, being an introvert and being willing to speak, being quick to speak sometimes, and feeling like, well, I don't even know if everyone's fully in agreement because not everyone's voicing that, but I know that they shared it in a what you call a safe space, or I've heard it come through the grapevine from other team members. But sometimes being the one to voice that is it weighs on you.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a little bit of a embedded in there is a message and a tip to those introverts, that it's so important when someone maybe feels safe with you or knows that you often are the one that speaks up, is you making it where you don't take that on, but you find a way with that introvert to, like, well, let's say it together, or I'll start it off and you join in. Make open an invitation that that introvert speaks on their own behalf. Because sometimes the extrovert actually is enabling this behavior that everybody comes to you and then you're the spokesperson. And I saw that go very, very badly, more than once, but I saw it go very badly for a particular person. She says, I got to speak for the team. And she just kept expressing, well, I'm the one that's always the one that seems disagreeable in the meeting because I'm speaking for the team. And we did a survey and everyone by and large said, we wish she would stop saying that because she's not speaking for me. They hadn't empowered her. And like you said, sometimes it was like maybe they were venting to her, but they weren't expecting things to come to the surface. And so where she represented, the team was so happy, they felt like, well, we were just venting to her in private. So I say that again, this is just from experience over time and what I've seen. I've seen some extroverts get put in some bad positions, thinking and in all good conscience that they were doing it for the good of the team. So I know we've gone down that road, but sometimes where the topic takes us, and I think that's a key point on all sides for everybody to kind of maybe reevaluate some of the dynamics in your teams. And that's why we have this dialogue. And even if you have to press pause and just take that nugget itself back to your team, and put that out there, or find a way to assess, well, where are we in this introvert extrovert kind of role playing, so to speak, then do that and then come back and push play and continue on with the rest of the topics we have.
Yeah.
Oh my, I first. Speaking of press pause, this one happens to be by accident, but this one is press pause before you speak. And I'll tell you where this came from. This reminds me of, I know when there's been times, especially when you go to write an email and you might be in the emotions, or and some of those are negative, anger of the moment, and you're reacting to something and you go to typing. And back when we were more in co-located, and this is one of the advantages, co-located, I could hear one of my close coworkers just typing, and we called it angry typing. You've heard of it? And so I immediately would get up or turn and say, step away from the keyboard, take a breath, let's go for a walk, let's grab some coffee. What's going on? Talk to me first. And then do not hit send. Whatever it is, sometimes they would say, come and read this and tell me what you think. And I was like, look, let's go to lunch, come back before you hit send. And you give yourself that physical buffer. But now we're in Zoom.
I know, I couldn't wait. I'm so curious to hear your advice. For now.
This is very real, because you've probably seen it or felt it, where especially when, hey, it's a 30-minute meeting, a 15-minute meeting, you got to get your digs in, you got to be heard, that type of thing. And it's like, sometimes press pause. And the best tip that I can give a team, especially if you might be going into a meeting where it might be rather tense, there's two things that I can suggest. One is, we did it when we would teach. The way we paused was, we'd have a bottle of water and we'd say, take a sip. Just stop and take a sip before you say anything. Just, or you might find yourself drinking throughout the whole meeting, which allows other people to talk, and your ears are still, keep your ears active, but take a sip to just kind of, or if it's just a gulp of air, just take a deep breath, is so important. And this is where you have team rules. If you need to call a timeout, is that we say call an audible, that any team member should be empowered that, hey, timeout. And that could mean what we talked about earlier, that it's feeling a little bit too comfortable and too uncomfortable. And maybe we all need to take a breath, on both sides, because even those people that are introvert, it's like, if and you've probably been in these meetings, Dawn, where two people are just going back and forth, everybody else becomes spectators. That's a
Yes.
time to call timeout. Now, I would love to say that your facilitator or your scrum master will jump in and do that timeout, but I'm not going to let team members off the hook, because this is your team. You're empowered. Empowerment doesn't mean you just choose what time of day that your daily stand-up is. You're empowered when things get tense, that you can call a timeout, and putting that in your team norms. Now everybody knows, oh, okay, it's there, it's explicit. If
Mhm.
someone calls a timeout, that means either, and then at that point, we can decide, is this going to be like a 5-minute timeout? Let's all just put turn our cameras off, put ourselves on mute, walk away, refresh your coffee, come back, and then let's recap what we know so far. And then, even as a facilitator, that might be a signal to the facilitator. Okay, restart it differently. For example, I might say, let's hear from everyone. I know we've all heard from
Mm.
Dawn and Jacqueline. Let's now go around. I might change it to round robin. If I call your name, I'd just like you to say, based on the two sides you've heard, which one are you leaning toward or have an opinion about? Something like that. So those are my two tips. Dawn, what are your thoughts, or have you ever seen any of that in action?
I mean, I have to say that the team that I am on today, I do have a scrum master who's very good at that, thank goodness. But I know in my previous experience, that was not always the case. I wish I would have utilized some of those tips that you just kind of said today, as far as doing the round robin, so that everyone could have had an opportunity to speak on it. But I do know that whenever it's gotten tense, sometimes we'll just we'll just park that, and then we'll come back and revisit it later. So I know that that's been a tip that's worked well. So
I like that. Let's park it. I love it. I love it.
mhm.
All right, let's talk about another, where don't make it personal. It's
Yes.
funny. These two figures, they don't have faces, but for some reason we know what's going on here. Just the physical action,
Yes.
and again, we now in Zoom. And this is something that's so funny, is that actually when we're face to face, sometimes you could mask your language. Now everybody's zoomed in. Now some people cheat and they turn their cameras on, but this is actually the reason why we do need to turn our cameras on, because we need to get back to kind
Yeah.
of practicing some of our social graces, but also sometimes, even as a facilitator, you're taking away a very important tool for us to identify, hey, somebody's holding something back. You've probably heard, if you have your camera on, you might hear me say, Dawn, you look like you have something you want to say, or
Yes.
Dawn,
Yes.
that doesn't look like that sit well with you. Go ahead.
No, I mean, you're so right. Currently in the role that I'm in now, we don't necessarily use cameras as much. And not until you just said that did it really clicked to me of the importance of cameras, because you're not truly able to read the room or people's expressions. It's already somewhat difficult of us trying to have those personal ways to know where a person stands without us being in the office. And then when you don't have a camera on, you truly, you don't really have anything to work with. Maybe you could, feel the tension in someone's voice, but yeah, I think that's a very good point. At least having cameras on, you're kind of able to see if someone's questioning something, unsure of something, really passionate, it just gives you something else to work from.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm even going to blame people for meetings that run too long or speakers who speak too long. Because when I'm talking, if everybody's shaking their head, I can move on. But if I'm looking at blank camera, with cameras on and a blank screen, I'm going to keep maybe elaborating until, and sometimes even if there's just one person on the screen, I might be looking at them and they're shaking like, let's move on. Well, maybe everybody else off camera isn't ready to move on. So when you said reading the room, that kind of trick, that's so important to the speaker. So when that speaker, when you have your camera off, you're not allowing that visual acknowledgement that we rely on to know, okay, everybody's got that, let me move on. So you could actually speed up a lot of meetings if you just would kind of, first of all, turn your camera on and give that nod of okay or got it.
But
The last thing that I wanted to point out on this visual is the words that because I thought about, well, everything kind
yes.
of has a subliminal message, but in some ways the four words on both screens are the exact same. One uses a different font, one's in a different location on the same screen. And that made me think that sometimes when I watch two people going back and forth, they're saying the same thing, they're maybe putting their own spin on it. And that's so important. The facilitator, and I'm going to say this again, when I'm talking about the facilitator, not everybody has to rely and wait on the Scrum Master. You all are active participants in that meeting and and sometimes you can say something to your colleagues, especially maybe engineer to engineer, that, you know what, I think we're saying the same thing here. I think you're saying XYZ and you're saying ZYX. But I feel like we've got enough information that we can move forward. And that sometimes coming from the audience makes all the difference in the world. So as team members, those who are active listening, we talked about, don't just watch two people spar back and forth. When you call that time out, you can even, talk to or speak to the fact that, hey, I think we've actually addressed this particular topic, and it's just a matter of that common ground, and let's move on. So
like you said too, I think and it's just so important not to take, I think at times we take it too personal and forget the big picture just because someone just didn't agree in the way that you said it. It could be even the same thing that you're talking about. Your guys are saying the same thing, but because they didn't say it in the exact words, it's, I'm upset. And it's like, oh, we're losing momentum here.
Exactly. And that's so important, that even as the person who is moderating or facilitating, and like I said, even a team member, take it away from the two people who are talking. And it's like, well, hey, I'd like to recap. This is what I heard. Has everybody else on the team, is that what you heard? Yes, thumbs up. And if the majority are saying we're all saying the same thing, it's moved on. Because I've seen this too, where as a facilitator, everybody on the team wanted to restate the same thing in their own words. And we had to, and it became it was their style. It just was their personality types. Everybody wanted to restate. And what we said is, okay, we've heard this. Does anyone have any additional information to add to this. If we've already said X, Y, Z, don't raise your hand unless you have something and to add beyond X, Y, and Z, because we don't need to restate it. Because that's another thing to watch for. For teams and interaction, it's almost like everybody wanted to hear it in their own. You want to hear their own voice, and it was like, this is making meetings go way too long. And then what we might do though to keep other people from monopolizing, when we get to the next topic, let's start it off with a different person, not the same two people, because maybe what they're trying to push back is that these two people keep dominating, and if I don't speak up or make my presence known, all we'll hear is their voice. And that's something, again, that a facilitator has to be aware of, because I've kind of said, even in my training classes, okay, let's hear from someone else. And I've done that with kind of, even I've gamified it where it's like, okay, I need to hear everybody's voice at least once, and then we'll go for second helpings. Okay. But I don't want, I don't want it just to be the same two people. So this next one, I can say, for example, Dawn, Natalie, you're off the hook. You already spoke. Okay. So who else is going to speak to this next question or this next topic? Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So so let me take you to number 3. And that is taking taking yourself
Yes.
a little bit, too seriously. And that is first of all, relax a little bit. That's kind of like that. Breathe into it for a minute, and that, especially that the desire sometimes to always be right. That's when you have to think about. A lot of times you're thinking, well, they don't get it. I know it, but they don't get it, and you're feeling that frustration and anxiety building up, and in your mind it's like, they've got to change. They've got to start seeing things my way. And my first thing to say, if those are the things, if that's what the little voice on your shoulder is saying, it's not them. It might be you. And so there's times where you have to take a deep breath, and take your, I've got my little picture of the brain. Take your brain down a notch and relax. And you don't always, even if something feels right, sometimes we need to go down another path to get to the point where everyone's bought in to what's right. And that's very different, especially in teaming. Because, and this is one way to also think about it, is whatever we're doing, whatever solution that we're visualizing, it's all a hypothesis. And I know my really, really smart people who already feel like they're experts and they know it all. And you have all of these different, validations that you're smart. It doesn't mean that you're not smart. It means that this is new territory and it all needs to be proven. And Dawn, I think you've especially, when you transition to IT, I know some of our newer listeners may not know, but you came into IT, and as much as, you study and you see things in books, it's not until you get with a team and you start working with a team that team dynamics, that soft skills is so important. And so that's when you kind of realize that it's like, it's great that you have really smart people on your team, but if you don't know how to be a team player, all of that smartness, it kind of implodes, and
We
you
can't.
find yourself just spinning. But talk about your experience.
Yes, well, we can't use it because we don't know how to work together for it to work in our favor. So you have all this knowledge, all this experience, but if we are not willing to compromise, if we're not willing to do a little give and take and even have empathy for one another, then we're not able to move forward as a team, almost like the tug of war, right? So we're just staying stuck in the middle because I'm not willing to lean your way. You're not willing to lean not my way. So neither one of us can win. So it wasn't until I think we truly were able to come to a compromise and say, hey, if you're willing to, trust me here, then I'll trust you next time around. And we could slowly see our growth as we continue. So
excellent. Well said. Well said. So the have you thought about, and the have you thought about, and that goes back to, that ties into my statement about it being a hypothesis, is that truly that going into a topic, into a discussion, with even the mindset that there's something that I could learn. And so you might see it one way, but there's always different angles. And just having, I love you said the word empathy, and having an appreciation that every member of the team are bringing their experience, what they've been exposed to. And because we've all been exposed to different things, it means that you have something new, a different just twist or perspective on the same topic. And unless we're leveraging that, what's the point of having different team members and having diversity if you're already going into it thinking that your way of looking at something is the only way of looking at it? So it kind of, I mean, it goes hand in hand, but it even from the very beginning, and this is why, and I'm saying this to facilitators, but as I said, you all can make this call, leverage icebreakers. Icebreakers let you kind of switch gears. Because if you're sitting at your desk and I'm an expert in this and I know this, and you're leveraging that perspective in your work, when you switch to a meeting where you've got to brainstorm and think about new ideas, sometimes you need to make a break from being the know-it-all to being someone that's ready to learn. And icebreakers are made to make you kind of come out of your shell, get, you either being silly or sharing something, especially virtual icebreakers. And that's why I also encourage facilitators, put thought into your icebreakers. I see icebreakers, sometimes I'm like, we learn nothing about each other from that icebreaker.
I was just about to say, what an amazing, that's a gold nugget right there. Because I feel as though with some of the icebreakers that I've taken, that I've participated in and have gotten to learn my team members, I got a different way of working with them by learning some of their interests, certain things that we connected on, certain things that I was just like, oh, wow, you do that? Or are you serious? And it gave us a different way to communicate.
Right. It absolutely. And it can be, it often too, and I definitely say this about our new virtual environment, is it kind of humanizes each other, because when you find yourself that all I know you as Dawn the BA, or even just take just the BA. The BA is talking right now. And I'm kind of, and even if I have a history with BAs and I'm projecting all of that on you, and I've even said that's a form of prejudice. You're prejudging someone, but if you've never had an opportunity to get to know them, then, or nothing other than the title that they carry, it's very easy to be more harsh with each other or rude with each other. This whole thing is about disagreeing nicely. And it's like when you stop and you see, get glimpses of who this person is. Now, I'm going to go back to when we were in physical offices, one of the main things that I used to teach, especially new BAs, is observe people's desks. They tell you who they are. What pictures do they have on their desk? What does their hugs? And I was like, make that a conversation starter. That was an icebreaker. I was teaching, But now we need to sometimes pause, especially when we're going from Zoom to Zoom to Zoom, and have a well thought out of icebreaker and the smallest glimpse into to someone, and even who they are and what their journey has been. It gives you more. It gives you something
Mhm.
to connect the empathy to. Oh, I see. So that person started out, someone I know very well. When they explained to me, they went to military school. They went to a military high school. So I understood like their need for structure and for rules and wanting
Mhm.
to understand why people weren't following the rules, and they had a
Right.
strong appreciation for rank and status. And when I said, well, go in and disagree, well, that person to them might have had a certain rank or status, and so that was hard for them. It's like,
Yes.
okay, now I get it. So
Mhm.
all of that is so important. So don't underestimate icebreakers in the value that they bring. And so, also I say to team members, like you said, Dawn, like you've been in some like, well, okay, yeah, it killed the first 15 minutes of our meeting, but it didn't really kind of get us open and ready. So
Mhm.
the sometimes if I know that the whole point of this next meeting is for us really to brainstorm and think outside the box, I make sure that it's really silly, because laughing at each other a little bit lets us like to be vulnerable. Laughing, when you say something and people laugh, you did what, Don? It's like,
Right.
okay, yeah, now you
Yes.
know my truth. You've
Mhm.
actually opened yourself up. So then when we're talking about things, you know keep that air of lightness, like, well, that's one idea, but so nobody, and I'll say this to my facilitators, and sometimes the extroverts in the room do this too, is if you see someone that's really made themselves vulnerable, just be like, well, I can see that's a point. Sometimes and I know that they look at the facilitator's reaction, and I'm like, I'm glad you did that. I'm glad you said that, because that's one great idea. So almost the more extreme the idea, I'm gonna jump on that and really kind of give everyone else permission. Go a little crazy with your ideas. It doesn't have to be safe. We're gonna
Mhm.
we're gonna go with some stuff that is out there. So I, as a facilitator, I'm always going to jump on and support the way idea, even if it's not the best idea or the one that we should. But what that person has done is open everybody else to start
Yes.
thinking what we always call thinking outside of the box. So
Right.
it's
Mhm.
setting the mood, the tone. So and what if now, this is something that I think can get weaponized, where when someone is trying to throw out new ideals or put their idea out there, is that what if can almost be on the attack. Well, this could happen and that can happen when used
Mhm.
in a negative, kind of connotation. And so this is for a facilitation perspectives. Make sure you safeguard when you're going through the ideation stage or the brainstorming. Let's hold off on the what ifs. After we
Mm.
kind of first get all of the creativity out, because what ifs can be creativity killers.
Oh,
And so
wow.
it's like, no, 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 let's time box. This is just be as silly and crazy as you like. Then
Mhm.
we'll apply whether is legal and ethical, or even possible. We'll do
Mhm.
all those able type
Mhm.
thinking at this portion of the meeting. And so that's a facilitation thing. And again, I'm going to empower team members. If you see someone going in immediately on the attack during the ideation, say, well, question, are we just throwing out ideals right now?
Mhm.
Just putting that out there can put the differentiate and help us establish the format for the meeting, to protect the ideas from, the what ifs. Because, and Dawn, I know you've seen this. This is a classic case where, and especially, and this is where I've seen where it really has created a long-term fiction. Someone from product comes in and says, I got this idea. And before they get deep into it, you have someone from a practical engineering perhaps perspective saying, that's too hard, or that's going to
Yep.
be difficult,
Kill
or
it.
our
Yep.
system won't. What you've done is not just knock that idea, you've shut them completely down. And
Mhm.
I know, I
Yes.
know that you've seen that.
I mean, an excellent point of saying you can truly weaponize it. I never looked at it like that before, but yes, before we could even brainstorm, get the ideas, have fun with it, you shot here, you shot it down. And it kind of puts the whole team in a different perspective. And so you got to kind of find a way to get us back to be excited in trying to think outside the box again. But I just know that some people can have their own agenda and totally use this to their advantage. But what a game changer by you saying, if this is just the fun, happy, just throw it out there ideas. And then maybe the next day we come and, okay, now how can we kill it? And then can we completely kill it off? Or is there still some foundation that it can stand, but these are just some of the, the negative paths or alternate paths that can happen. But yeah, I think that's a good idea. Now I'm going to try to utilize this one.
And you know what, you hit a good point. I even like maybe the first, even it being two separate meetings. First, let's just stay in our creative nature. Let's say if we've got an hour or 45-minute meeting, and let's talk about all of the possibilities, and then come back and using what if to help maybe prioritize which one of those ideas are more feasible. But there's one thing, and I know probably embedded in this deck, I talk about this again, but the idea that even if there is the possibility, again, I said these are hypotheses. So you're here to kind of prove we think that it may be very difficult to do, for example. But until we really get into it or go a little bit further or create a small prototype, do we know for sure? So those people using those what ifs, those don't necessarily have to be considered showstoppers. Some of those are just things that it could be something that we spike, in Agile, we always talk about spikes or ways to research. Well, let's spike that. That's a good point, but let's spike it. Or let's put it in the risk register and keep our eye on it, because one of the recent groups used to use the terminology, let's not try and solve a problem that hasn't already happened. So that's what a what if. It might happen. It's a potential risk, but sometimes you have to take risk. And in our world, software solutions, trying to be innovative, you've got to take risks. So people who I find that really recognize what if, they are adverse to risk, and they want to figure out every possible thing that could go wrong and even try to avoid it. And that's not safe. That's not safe for a group that's trying to innovate and find a solution. So that's something to keep in mind too. And I know for sure that's going to come up a little bit later. And Dawn, just talking about what's coming up a little bit later. As I mentioned to whoever's watching this, you can pause, take these 3 or 4 items. You might have already gotten some pretty good nuggets that you want to take back to your team. Pause and come back and join us back. We've got about 4 or 5 other tips we'd like to share with you. And of course, like, subscribe, and share these with your friends. So let's move to the next one, Dawn. Okay. when your mouth is open, your ears are closed.
Yes.
So
Yes,
we'll do
yes,
a
yes.
little less of this and a little more of that listening. That's so important. And sometimes, it's not necessarily meant to be a bad thing, but think about even if every team member looked at it as, have I heard from everybody else before I speak again? That's so important. And sometimes when you are talking, then maybe bounce or lobby the ball, or we call it popcorn, over to someone else on your team. It's like that doesn't just have to fall again on the facilitator. If I'm finished talking or I've said something and I'm getting blank stares from my team members, it shouldn't just be the facilitator trying to engage and pull team members in. It's like, hey, Dan or Elisa or Sally, well, what are your thoughts to what I just said? Um, and if you're finding, and Dawn, I know you might be, you might have some thoughts on this. If you're finding that, hey, your team is being really dry, there's something that facilitators do. And if you notice, the tips that I'm sharing as a facilitator, I'm now saying everybody on the team. So imagine if everybody comes with a facilitation toolkit, that when the meeting starts dragging or there's not engagement, if you've got 10 facilitators instead of, and I don't mean facilitating as in taking over the meeting, but just helping to draw everybody in so that we can get to the topic and have a robust conversation and complete the goals of the meeting. I think that this will go a long way. And so if over and over you see your team members not participating, sometimes create allies before the meeting. Hey, I'm going to bring up such and such because
Mm.
I see this is on the agenda. You and I have talked about this offline. So when I bring it up, back me up, and I'm going to throw it to you to add some comments as well. So let's
Mm.
create a few allies going into the meeting, and so that to kind of stir the conversation. So I want to get your thoughts because I know, Dawn, you've talked about some struggles recently with teams.
Yes, and I'm gonna have a little bias here because I think I had cheated a little because I learned that tip from you early on. But speaking of just in general, I have participated on a team, and when I say no one provides feedback, no one is often willing to speak up when we are all together versus individually when we're, two or three of us or we're over here. And I would say somewhat out of the eyes of leadership,
Mm-hmm.
that's where I don't necessarily see the same participation or voicing in how people feel about certain things. And and so although we do have a really good facilitator and they do sometimes call on, I mean, it's just so dry. It's just like, yes, no, but no. Why do you feel a yes or why do you feel a no? But I will say that I have utilized the reaching out to team members offline,
Mm-hmm.
prior to the meeting saying, hey, I'm going to bring this up. I just wanted to know if you're able to join the meeting and if you're, you can speak to it or you can participate. And I know that that has helped me, for myself anyway, get some participation in the meeting, because we just somewhat have a team that's just not quick to speak up or voice our concerns.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, absolutely. So, it's kind of a two-way street that we've kind of touched upon with, especially that mixture of introverts and extroverts. And this is something that, as a facilitator too, I like to say to my introverts is that you still have a responsibility in your way to make your voice heard, even
mm,
if it's not talking.
yes,
And
yes.
so I do find that a lot of them do like to use the chat room.
Mm,
And that it's like, I'll even say, either I'll call on you, or either you can weigh in the chat room, but I
mhm,
need to have some interaction with you. And
mm,
so, almost to avoid me calling them out, I will get some type of interaction in the chat room. And that I even use. I need to hear from everyone. Another way, like I said, to hear from everyone, I need those thumbs up. I need to see those thumbs up. Um, and let's be honest, there, I fear that sometimes, people not speaking and not engaging is also a form of disruption.
mm.
And
Woo,
it's like,
yes.
you wouldn't have been invited to the meeting if we didn't think you had something to contribute. Let alone, when we leave this meeting, we need you to have buy-in. And the other part to that I want to say is, when teams either ask to be empowered, or they're in an environment that they have been identified as an empowered teams means that you have full participation.
Mhm,
And because you all together are making decisions, and those decisions come through those discussions. So when you are checking out or pulling back, or let's be honest, we can't tell the difference between whether you are not engaged, not interested, distracted, or in today's terms, where it's really, there's a lot of light being shined on, that people aren't even present. And this is giving people, and I know I'm going down a whole different rabbit hole, but I can't, you'll hear on one of my podcasts where I talk about people working two jobs. So when you put me on mute, I don't know which of those categories you fall in. And when I don't see any interaction from you, it's as if you're not at that meeting. So I don't even count you as present.
yeah.
And so that's the big difference. And you are the reason why meetings, we have to continue meetings and continue discussions. Or the last thing I want to hear from you is, when we get down the road, that you didn't agree with the decision when you were invited and didn't weigh in, didn't participate, and didn't give the team an opportunity to understand what concerns or what things that they need to be looking out for. So I know that was that was
Mhm,
very near and dear to me. That it's the actually the opposite of this, is where you put yourself on mute and don't open up. That's just as unfair as the opposite
mhm,
end, or you're forcing those few one or two people to do all of the talking. And I'm going to
mhm,
say to those people, sometimes, don't talk.
mhm,
And if we're going to have awkward
mhm,
silence, then my thought is, we'll cancel this meeting, give everybody time to collect their thoughts, and we're going to reschedule this meeting. And if we find ourselves rescheduling meetings, that's on you as the team. And
yeah.
that's an indictment on the team, and whether or not you even want to be a part of that team.
Wow.
So, it's
Big.
very important. And I think that, there's some abuse that needs to be called out. And what they're really doing is they're abusing the privilege of working from home, and which is going to cost, a lot of organizations, and cost a lot of teams to be called back into the office. And I'm going to blame that on the people that are not speaking up in these meetings, not leveraging Zoom, because this is the vehicle for people who want to work remote.
Yeah.
So you now know how I feel about it.
Yes, yes, yes.
um,
Have some balance. Mouth open, ears open. Speak.
that's right. It goes both ways,
Yes.
So you know which end of the spectrum you're on. Either you need to open your ears more, or you need to open your mouth on. So figure out which end of the spectrum, you're on, and work that out quickly.
Woo. This transition right here, I need to invite my sister-in-law. And this is her complete belief system.
Okay.
Just truly.
This is and this is something to watch for. And again, team members
Mhm.
even and watching for is that it's very easy to kind of throw in the road, I'm confused or I don't understand, and just being in a
Yes.
state of confusion, a state of not understanding. And what a lot of people try to do is push that back on the facilitator or the presenter or even their other team members.
Yes.
When in reality, the ownership of becoming and finding understanding is on you,
Mm-hmm.
because too often um, that confusion comes from I've provided you the information or I've provided you the answer and you just don't like it. And
Yes.
that's something that we've got to use. It's like, no, no, no. Here is what it is. Now, tell me, is it that you don't agree with it? And when I get you to the point where you are saying, yes, I've heard what you've said, it's more of I don't agree with it, that's a different issue.
Mm-hmm.
Because that goes very, very much in line with what I talk about alignment, is that you don't always have to agree, but you have to, at some point, understand that we've got to move on and move forward. And we've
Yes.
got to move forward with what we have, what we know under these circumstances.
Right.
Because a lot of times not agreeing is also not being willing, back to what I said before, taking risk.
Uh,
And
mm-hmm.
so what I would start doing is looking at people's, are they comfortable? Are they comfortable with taking risks? And are they comfortable with the position the organization is taking as far as taking risk? And I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to say something that's probably near and dear because it goes back to one of our first engagements. A prime example, because I deal so much with introducing change. When
Mm-hmm.
I went into the organization that we know, and they presented that we are going to reset Agile. We're going to change the way you think about Agile, and we're going to get into a more structured posture. This is something the organization had decided. This we know, and I as the person that was um, helping coach and advise on it, I said very clearly, we're going to go slower before we go faster.
Mm-hmm.
The organization was willing to take that risk. When I got to and it really was the middle management, we got all these arguments and pushback in regards to, no, this is going to slow us down. We're going at a good pace right now. It
Mm-hmm.
was, and this is something that I acknowledge as a coach. Yes, you have been able to achieve things with the way you've been doing Agile. And that sometimes throws organizations, team management off. Is like, well, we were doing just fine before you. Fine, it might have been okay, but we're trying to take it and optimize it. We're trying to take it to the next level. So
Right.
what you're fighting is progress and growth.
Yes.
And so the team wants the organizations decided they want to grow, and you decided you don't want to take that risk.
Mm-hmm.
So what you try to do is throw, you're in the bag of tricks of resistance is confusion. And I, as a
Right.
coach, recognize when I have someone that wants to stay confused. And
Mm.
you have to call them on it. You've got to really hold up that mirror. And sometimes it takes a one-on-one intervention, because, and I know people have used this reference before, but one bad apple, so to speak, they
Yes.
can
Woo.
confuse the whole apple cart.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so you got to get to the source of that, and that person that's operating in this, and pull them out and pull them aside. But I know you've lived it, Dawn.
Yes, and I think it goes back to, we grow up and we want to feel like we're so mature, and it comes to situations like this that you're almost still act like a kid again, or they say this is high school all over again, where You have trust in an individual. You're close to that person. And so you want to just kind of stay committed to them instead of the process.
Right. Right.
And you all are in alignment together to stay confused, and we're all suffering as a whole because you just want to kind of commit to this one individual who's not willing to see a different perspective or not willing to grow. And it of course, I got to witness. It's amazing how one person could affect so many different people because of the trust that they've earned with those individuals and their lack of willingness to see progress because maybe it wasn't their suggestion or their idea. And it truly can, yeah, one apple can truly kill the bag.
Absolutely. And so, one of the things is uh, team members as well as facilitators and seasoned coaches, even your Scrum Masters, managers. I'm calling on you to when someone, you see my guy here, he just keeps shrugging, he's in a loop. And that's the way some people are. They just, I don't get it. I don't understand. It doesn't make sense. You kind of try and peel that back and understand, is that an emotion or is it a part of is it from an education perspective, is it that they're confused because they don't have information? And sometimes the only answer we have for them is this is the information we have at this moment. And that's why so much of what we are doing is we're exploring new worlds. And you've got to have a sense of that risk that you're not going to know it all before you have to make the next step. That is our world. And so those people that are going through that are finding themselves having to step out of their comfort zone. And that's something that as a team, when you're going through this teaming process, you've got to make sure everybody knows what they signed up for, so to speak, and that they have to sometimes, re-sign up for it, but that you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah,
And,
being open.
yeah, absolutely. So you remember,
Yes.
I talked about this one because I have seen this one like just tear through a 60-minute meeting. Just at the everybody's just saying the same thing, and just at some point, somebody like, hold on, wait, I don't hear a net new. And there's different ways because you see how I've got my little catchphrases. Facilitators, you got to find fun ways to be like, well, time out.
Right.
We don't have a net new here. I think that we've had enough information, and or sometimes, and this is something else I'll say to facilitators, sometimes you got to make it visual because words are flying. It's like, okay,
Yes.
hold on, this is what I heard. And if and again, we've got, we've played with, I don't know if a lot of you have noticed, Zoom has a new feature, a whiteboard feature. And if I was well versed in it, oh, why not? I'm going to go spontaneous here. If it'll allow me, there are some things that you can do. I'm just doing, just drawing as we go here. But Dawn said,
Okay.
Natalie said,
Right.
Jason said. So there are ways within, and I just use a feature, it's called annotation. And I know that there's something called a whiteboard, but if you could recap and whatever the topics are, here are the pros, here are the cons. Do we have any net new? Anyone have anything new to add to this? If not, okay, we're gonna table this particular discussion.
Right.
There is another way too, is if you start to know the personality types within your team, and people need to kind of say things in their own words, it's offer the topic before the meeting so that that discussion comes out. The thing that comes to mind for me is Slack. So here are 3 topics we're going to talk about. Please weigh in Slack. And in
Mhm.
today's meeting, we'll do a quick summary and then we'll vote on which direction we're going to go for those 3 topics. So
Mhm.
make the point and the purpose of the meeting is more of to make decisions, make the
Mhm.
brainstorming outside in Slack, and it lets people even at their leisure. Now there's one pro and con about that. Some discussions are healthier when you do have the interactive nature
Mhm.
versus people just having kind of a monologue about what they think. Sometimes you do need to ping off of a point someone made, but you can do a lot of that in Slack and then just do the quick summary part of
Mhm.
that. Any final words, any final thoughts, and then let's take it to a vote. So keep that in mind, especially about time boxing and the effective use of meetings, because there's a lot of chatter about Zoom fatigue.
Yeah.
Any thoughts that you want to add to that one? Now I just
No,
have
I
to go
think
back and figure out how to erase my while I'm trying to figure this out.
no, I love the idea of using just kind of like the whiteboard and putting up there, this is what was said. Is there anything new, so that we don't just stay in that cycle of just, we're all hearing the same thing, but it's just being said by somebody else's voice. So, but yeah, like you said, you might have to just practice before you pull out this tool on how on how to get it to work. So
Yeah, this is the pros and cons of going spontaneous.
but then
um,
but then it allows the team to, kind of take a minute, laugh, joke about it, and maybe you could come up with something net new while we are trying to undo what we just did. So just, I
exactly.
think given, different tools and lightening up the mood sometimes helps allow that creativity to flow. So
No, you have a good point, and that is even just using different tools um, is just sometimes breaks up the air, breaks up the atmosphere, and that is that in itself is something important to do as facilitators. And you probably hear through my talking that the facilitator's role, it's not an easy job.
oh
Some
no.
people make it look easy, and that's great, but the reality is that you have to do some preparation. And some of that preparation, some of the most important preparation is knowing the people on your team, knowing
Yeah.
their personalities, those types of things. Um, and so um, and that brings us, let me bridge that, and thank you, Dawn. That
Yes, of
brings us to
course.
the next one. Um, and just like what we just did, let me speak to that. As facilitators, it's great to have your other people and other members of the team that can jump in and help. Dawn, we just kind of just seamlessly jumped in, and so meetings, you should have a co-facilitator, because
Yes.
especially in us using so much technology and doing this
Hmm.
all virtual, is that you have hiccups. And
Yes, yes.
so when you've got someone else that can be your backup and pinch hit until you get yourself together and regroup, that it helps for the
Mhm.
audience to have a really good experience. And
Mhm.
I'm going to throw that out to some of our listeners. Please, as you're watching these, there's the option to leave comments, and I'd like to hear just what has been. When have you seen tools or techniques, or are you a facilitator? And what tools and techniques have you used for some of the things that we've talked about so far? We'd love to add to our toolbox, and we love the idea of you sharing with the other people that are watching and clicking on this video. But we're very close to, I think we've got two more topics within this recording, and then we will have a part 2 and a part 3 of this as well. This is about disagreeing nicely. And so our next one was, I don't like the solution. This is someone that it complains about everyone else's, but they don't have one themselves. This
Woo!
this to me this to me speaks to one of the heart of alignment is in our world where everything's a hypothesis. We're taking the best of our past experience, trying to apply it, but everything is new territory. And for some, it should and it should be what makes your job exciting is
Mhm.
that there are things that we are discovering and inventing and innovating on and taking and pushing the boundaries. That's exciting. And that is IT in the nutshell. Even if you today were to write a new system that was a social media platform like Facebook, let's say, you decide you want to, you're going to take it to the next level. Even if you worked for Facebook since its inception, it's still going to be, there's different times now, different laws, different perceptions. People have different expectations. You can't write the same code as you did yesterday and expect it to have the longevity. We're not just rewriting what we've done, we're innovating.
Yes.
But that's the exciting part. So with that innovation, there will be unknowns. And to our last slide, there will be some confusion, but that confusion should be met with, well, let's experiment, let's explore, let's try some different things. And in this space where you feel like, I don't like what you're saying, but I have nothing new to offer, you owe it in your teaming and in your environment to find alignment to support which one that we want to give a try, that we want and then through process elimination. What is one of the key things that Agile often says? Fail fast and learn fast. This is what
Oh,
this is all about. I'm gonna
yes.
pause. Dawn, you have something you want to add to that.
Well, I just have to share. I heard the best saying yesterday and just one of the videos that I was listening to. And okay, everyone has their, we're all unique. We all have our different personalities, and there's naturally just some people who should have just been inspectors, is how she put it. So where you're going to tell me why this can't work. And we get that, we do need that. You should have been like a building inspector, like, nope, this isn't right. This is wrong. But okay, behind that telling me this is wrong and this can't be done. But yes, okay, so what is your idea of how it could be?
Mhm.
For every no, what can be done? And if you don't have that, then maybe you should just pause and put that energy and effort into thinking of how we could do it, what could
Yep.
possibly help that no before you speak to that no. And I thought
Yeah.
that was such a great tip.
Yeah.
So
That is absolutely, and there's you need those people that say what if. It's like you said, you have to understand a time and a place, and you have to time box it. And some of those people, if you know you're the what if person, you have to be self-aware. And even say to the team, is this a good time for me to bring this up, or I've got some reservations. And
mm,
what I will say to facilitators, give them a place to park those concerns. If it's a risk register, is it a parking lot? Is it a note? Because one of the things that I say, not every concern is a showstopper,
Yeah.
because we're here to take some risk. And that's something that as a team, part of your motto, part of your mantra is we're here to take some risk. This is what keeps companies moving forward and keeps them in business, is that
Yes.
you've got to try some things. That's what gets them in business. That's what keeps them in business,
And
especially in IT. So to your point, I just would, also say, if you can't come up with an idea, what you have to align and find a way to get behind and support without reservation. And that's what I mean by align. You can't get behind something and then be waiting for that moment when you can say, I told you so. I knew it wouldn't work. That's not what we mean. That means that, you know
Right.
what? Based, and I often say this to teams when they have to make a decision, based on the information we have right now. We're not going to have all those answers. I hear your what ifs, but we're not going to have all those answers until we move a little bit further, and then we can reevaluate those. But based on option A, B, and C, which one do we want to explore next? And it's all about, we're going to explore, we're going to learn some things, and this is sometimes another way of putting it, which one do we want to try and learn from next?
Oh, wow.
Not that we're gonna, not that it's going to be right. We know all of them are might be wrong, and that sometimes taking the safe bet isn't the right thing for us as a company, because we are trying to reinvent things and take them to the next level. So a lot of it does go back to your mindset about risk taking.
Yes, yes.
Go ahead,
But
let's
I,
go to the next one. Oh,
Mhm.
go ahead
Oh,
with
no,
your
I was
last
just gonna
comment.
say, I do kind of like that, challenging someone for for seeing the problem, um, providing your own solution to it. I think that would actually make you kind of have to just take a moment and really even think outside the box.
Absolutely. think we have, I think we only have about one more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's all about respectfully disagreeing. We don't have to all have the, be of a single mind. We don't want you to. We don't want groupthink. It's not what you're saying, it's how you're saying it too. And one of the things, and the visual kind of just says, is whenever you're contributing something, is first find the connector. Find a connection with in what the person is saying, that we do have a common alignment, and then add to. And in some ways, and there's a technique where people say, you never say but, or the word or, you say and. So whatever that
Oh,
person's saying, you're in agreement. So yes, we can do that. And what if we also add, and so, and later on we can look at, so you're using that and to bridge. Your idea is validated at that point, and you are now, it's a more of a conversation of collaboration.
mhm.
So use and connector versus or but, because sometimes when people hear or but, I used to use an example in one of my classes. If your manager came to you and said, Dawn, you're doing an awesome job, you're doing excellent, but you didn't hear it, and you're ready waiting for that but what?
Right.
It totally changes your mind shift, that
Mhm.
something, on the negative side or derogatory side is about to come.
Yes.
Whereas and is, again, an olive branch, you're doing an excellent job, Dawn, and we want to help you continue to develop your career.
Mhm.
And so
Yes.
Is that your first time hearing that it's said
It,
that
it
way?
is. It is. Yeah.
It really does. I saw a group when they started exercising it. You know, you really could see the difference, and
Mhm.
and
Because
and
it means
with
it's almost like you're adding to my point, but not, tearing it down. With
right,
the but, it's kind of like you said, you kind of stuck on that. Okay, now what?
yeah,
What's
exactly.
wrong?
Exactly. So that I hope today's conversation gave you plenty of little nuggets to take away, to try to apply, share with your teams. A lot of what Don and I share with teams are great conversation starters for your retrospectives. Picking a theme and having doing a deep dive on how to disagree nicely. It's also a great way to kick off a team. If you're forming a new team, I always say, hey, let's talk about how we're going to disagree in the beginning while we're still all in our honeymoon stage. And then when there's some tension later on, we can go back to our team norms and remind ourselves of some of these best practices. And
Mhm.
do know there's more. But
Yes.
for today, we're going to let you kind of digest the sips of knowledge that we've shared with you. As Dawn said in the beginning, listen, learn, leverage, and launch. And then stay tuned for our part 2.
Mhm.
Dawn, any final words that you have for us today?
No, as you said, yeah, part 2 will be coming, just to continue to add on to some of the tips and tricks that we've already shared. Hoping to just make sure that everyone's willing to, as they're listening and learning, they're willing to take this back to their teams, leverage some of these tips, and then come back and share with us on the comments on what has worked for them. And so stay tuned till next time.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.